The violation notice landed on my windshield like a slap across the face. 3 days after moving in, my Tesla had become a target for hatred. Margaret Hollis, HOA president, stood in my driveway with crossed arms and venom. "This car violates our community aesthetic standards," she snapped without even greeting me. I blinked, staring at the sleek black vehicle I had worked years for. "It's electric. Not some rusted junker lowering anyone's property value," I said. She sneered. "It's like a weapon of righteousness. Charging cables are an eyesore. And so are out-of-state plates," she muttered. My hands trembled slightly, memories of deployment flashing through my exhausted, frustrated mind. I had survived 2 tours overseas. Yet this woman intimidated me more deeply. "I just moved my family here for peace." "Not harassment," I whispered desperately. Margaret smirked onto her growing stack of paperwork. My neighbor Elena watched silently from her porch, phone recording every cruel word. She had warned me earlier that Margaret targeted anyone who seemed different somehow. New families, veterans, definition of belonging. I swallowed hard, trying to remain calm despite my racing, anxious heartbeat. "These bylaws don't even mention electric vehicles," I argued, voice shaking with anger. Margaret laughed coldly, waving her clipboard like an unquestionable scepter of authority. "I make the rules around here. Soldier boy," she said. That nickname stung sharper than any insult I had faced during deployment. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let her see how deeply she'd wounded me. My wife Sarah stepped outside, baby on her hip, eyes wide with worry. "Is everything okay?" she asked, sensing immediately the tension thickening around us. Margaret's smile turned saccharine the moment she noticed my wife's presence nearby. "Just explaining our community standards, dear." "Head about," she said. Sarah's eyes narrowed, recognizing condescension dressed thinly as polite neighborly concern. I exhaled slowly, fists clenched, fighting the urge to raise my exhausted voice. "We'll review the bylaws tonight," I said, forcing politeness through gritted teeth. Margaret turned sharply, heels clicking against pavement like a judge's gavel. "You have 72 hours before this escalates to a formal hearing," she warned. The word hearing echoed ominously, heavy with threat and unmistakable. Calculated power. That night, poring over dense HOA paperwork carefully, page after page revealed contradictions, vague language, enforcement patterns. "This doesn't add up," Sarah whispered, highlighting another inconsistency buried deep inside. I remembered something from my deployment. Something about laws protecting renewable energy choices. State legislation had recently passed protecting homeowners' rights to electric vehicle charging. Margaret's precious bylaws seemed to directly violate protections guaranteed under state law. My exhaustion suddenly transformed into something sharper. Something resembling cautious, burning hope. I wasn't just fighting for a parking spot anymore. Not really. I was fighting against unchecked power disguised as community order and tradition. Sarah squeezed my hand gently, her eyes reflecting quiet, Determined solidarity. We need a lawyer, she said firmly. Already searching for local legal assistance. I nodded. Inside my chest. Something dangerously close to resolve. Margaret thought she was dealing with another scared, compliant homeowner she could bully. She had no idea who she had actually chosen to provoke that morning. Outside, illuminating the violation notice still clutched tightly. Tomorrow. This fight would finally begin on different, stronger terms. Morning arrived heavy with determination. Coffee untouched. Papers scattered across our kitchen table. I called 3 attorneys before finding one who genuinely seemed to listen. Her name was Diane Castillo. Sharp-eyed. Unmistakably unafraid of bullies. Send me everything, she said. Every notice. Every email exchange. Within hours, Sarah and I had suspected ourselves. The HOA's vague aesthetic clause directly contradicted recent state renewable energy protections. This isn't just unfair, Diane explained. It's potentially illegal discrimination against clean energy. Relief washed over me, quickly replaced by anger at months of harassment. Margaret hadn't stopped at Tesla complaints, escalating quickly into something far more personal. She questioned my military background publicly, insinuating I'd fabricated my veteran status entirely. Neighbors began avoiding eye contact, afraid of becoming Margaret's next chosen target. Elena grew bolder. Our private community group chat. Other residents began messaging privately, revealing their own histories of unfair treatment. A disabled veteran named Robert had been denied a simple wheelchair ramp permit. An immigrant family faced relentless fines over supposedly improper holiday decorations outside. Margaret's pattern became impossible to ignore once people finally started comparing notes. Diane suggested gathering testimonies, building a case stronger than just my situation alone. Power like hers thrives on isolation, she said. We're going to break that. Meanwhile, scheduling an emergency board hearing within 5 days. She wanted me publicly humiliated, fined, my vehicle entirely. I felt fear creeping back. Memories of feeling powerless flooding unwanted into mind. Sarah reminded me gently of every battle I'd already survived overseas before. You didn't quit then, she whispered. Don't you dare quit now either. Her words steadied something trembling deep inside my exhausted, anxious chest. Diane prepared meticulously, cross-referencing state statutes against every HOA bylaw violation. She discovered Margaret had selectively enforced rules, ignoring violations from her personal friends. Photographs surfaced showing Margaret's own driveway cluttered, completely violating her precious aesthetic standards. Hypocrisy was Margaret's most consistent and undeniable personal trait. The night before the hearing, I barely slept, mind racing through possibilities endlessly. What if the board sided blindly with Margaret regardless of legal evidence presented? What if my family faced retaliation despite everything we were fighting bravely for? Sarah held me close, whispering reassurances neither of us fully, completely believed yet. Morning light eventually broke through curtains, signaling the day demanding our courage finally. I dressed carefully, choosing my old military jacket despite Margaret's previous cruel mockery. This wasn't defiance for show. This was reclaiming dignity stripped away unfairly. Diane met us outside the community center. Briefcase heavy with damning evidence inside. Remember, she said. The law is on our side. Stand tall and steady. Inside. With curious, nervous neighbors whispering among themselves quietly. Margaret sat front and center. Smug smile firmly fixed across her powdered face. She gavelled the meeting open, clearly expecting another easy, unchallenged victory today. We're here regarding repeated violations from the Tesla parked illegally on Maple Street, she announced. I stood slowly, heart pounding. Me without hesitation. Actually, Diane said calmly. We're here to discuss your violation of state law. Margaret's smile flickered slightly, confusion briefly crossing her otherwise composed expression. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, sensing something significant shifting within the room. I looked directly at Margaret, finally feeling something stronger than fear ignite inside. This was no longer about parking spaces, charging cables, or petty aesthetic complaints. This was about justice. Long overdue. Finally arriving at her doorstep instead. Diane stepped forward, placing thick legal documents firmly onto the wooden podium before everyone. Section 47B of state law protects residential electric vehicle charging rights, she announced. Margaret's confident posture stiffened visibly, fingers tightening around her ceremonial wooden gavel tightly. Your HOA's aesthetic clause directly contradicts this protection, Diane continued. Voice unwavering and clear. Gasps rippled through the crowded room. Neighbors exchanging stunned, disbelieving glances quietly. Diane projected enlarged photographs showing Margaret's own cluttered driveway onto the screen behind. Selective enforcement, she stated, is not governance. It's targeted harassment, plain and simple. Robert stood suddenly, voice trembling but determined, sharing his denied wheelchair ramp story publicly. The immigrant family followed, describing years of unfair fines over harmless holiday decorations. Elena played her recorded footage, Margaret's cruel nickname echoing loudly throughout the silent room. Margaret's face drained of color, composure crumbling beneath mounting, undeniable public evidence. This is outrageous, she stammered. I built this community. I deserve more respect. You built fear, Diane corrected sharply. And today that fear finally ends here. The board members shifted uncomfortably, distancing themselves visibly from Margaret's crumbling defense. One board member finally spoke, voice shaking. Rule enforcement repeatedly. Another revealed Margaret had threatened retaliation against anyone questioning her unchecked authority publicly. The room erupted into outraged whispers. Years of suppressed frustration finally surfacing completely. Diane presented her final argument, requesting immediate dismissal of all Tesla-related violations entirely. She also formally requested Margaret's removal as HOA president, citing repeated legal violations. A vote was called immediately, nervous hands slowly rising throughout the crowded room. One by one, reclaiming courage they'd long suppressed silently. The final tally confirmed it. Margaret's reign collapsing under the weight of justice. She stood frozen, gavel slipping uselessly from her trembling, defeated fingers finally. "This isn't over," she hissed. Though everyone present clearly knew otherwise completely. Security quietly escorted her outside. Applause erupting unexpectedly throughout the crowded community center. Sarah squeezed my hand tightly, tears glistening with overwhelming relief and pride. Diane smiled warmly. Justice doesn't always come fast. But it always comes eventually. Outside. Lot. Illuminating my Tesla parked proudly and rightfully. Neighbors approached cautiously, offering apologies for previous silence during Margaret's reign of fear. Elena hugged Sarah tightly, promising stronger community unity moving forward together finally. Robert thanked me personally, revealing his ramp permit had already been approved instantly. The immigrant family smiled brightly. Fines completely dismissed under new community leadership entirely. Weeks later. Separate legal action for discriminatory practices. Her own neighborhood. The one she'd ruled through fear. Ultimately rejected her completely. She moved away quietly. Reputation destroyed. Friendships abandoned. Power utterly and permanently stripped. Our community elected new leadership. Transparent. And genuinely committed to equality. I stood beside my Tesla one evening. Charging cable connected proudly without fear. Sarah joined me. Our daughter giggling happily between us under glowing porch lights. "We did it," she whispered, resting her head gently against my exhausted shoulder. I smiled. Every moment of doubt finally worth enduring. Sometimes justice arrives slowly, disguised within paperwork. Courage. Solidarity. Bullies thrive only when silence protects them, and silence had finally been broken. My Tesla wasn't just a car anymore. It symbolized resilience against unchecked power. Every family deserves dignity, fairness in their own homes. That night, without fear, our family felt truly, completely free.